There comes a moment in every shifting relationship when the energy changes. It is subtle at first. You speak a little less. You explain a little less. You chase a little less. And without announcing it, you begin choosing yourself. That is when something powerful happens. The other person feels it. Not because you told them, not because you threatened to leave, but because your absence of desperation creates a presence of strength. Human beings do not respond to pressure the way they respond to loss. Creates resistance. Loss creates awareness. When someone senses they might truly lose you, not the dramatic version, not the emotional manipulation, but the calm, grounded version, they wake up. They begin replaying conversations. They notice your silence. They feel the difference between having you and possibly not having you. And here is what most people misunderstand. When you detach with dignity, you activate clarity in others. Your calm becomes a mirror. Your stability becomes contrast. The person who once moved casually now begins to move carefully. The one who delayed decisions begins to feel urgency. Not because you demanded it, but because your energy shifted from "I need this" to "I am okay either way." That shift is powerful. When someone truly values you but has grown comfortable, your growth disrupts their comfort. Comfort breeds complacency. Complacency breeds inaction. When they sense that your standards are rising, that your self-respect is solid, that your world does not revolve around their approval, something inside them recalibrates. They may reach out in unexpected ways. They may communicate more clearly. They may initiate conversations they once avoided. They may take steps they once postponed. The unexpected action is not random. It is a response to perceived loss. But here is the deeper truth. The goal is not to trigger reaction. The goal is to become so aligned with your worth that reaction becomes irrelevant. When you stop over-explaining, you regain mystery. When you stop over-giving, you regain balance. When you stop fearing loss, you regain power. And power used calmly is magnetic. If this person does something unexpected to not lose you, it will not be because you beg for change. It will be because they finally see what life looks like without your energy constantly compensating for their inconsistency. And sometimes the most unexpected action is growth. Growth in communication, growth in commitment, growth in effort. But remember this, that unexpected moves should meet your evolved standards, not pull you back into old patterns. When someone rises, observe consistency, not intensity. Intensity is emotional. Consistency is intentional. The real transformation is not about what they do. It is about what you no longer tolerate. When you walk with quiet confidence, you create a decision point for others, evolve or exit. And those who truly do not want to lose you will choose to evolve, not loudly, not dramatically, but intentionally. Because when someone realizes your absence would create a space no one else can fill, they act. Unexpectedly, deliberately. Detachment creates clarity in ways that are often subtle, but profoundly transformative. When you step back from the constant emotional push and pull of a relationship or interaction, you allow both yourself and the other person to see the situation with fresh eyes. This is not about coldness or indifference. It is about stepping into a space of emotional stability where your value is clear and undeniable. Most people spend their energy trying to control outcomes, explaining themselves repeatedly, or chasing validation. This creates noise, confusion, and often a distorted perception of reality. Detachment cuts through that noise. By removing the pressure of neediness, you stop feeding the illusion that your presence is conditional on their attention or approval. Your calm, grounded state communicates far more about your worth than any words ever could. The clarity that emerges from detachment is dual. It illuminates your own boundaries and priorities while simultaneously reflecting your value to others. When someone sees that you are not desperate for their attention, that you do not revolve your life around their actions, they are forced to confront the truth of your presence in their life. They begin to see what they are taking for granted, what their complacency has allowed, and what it truly means to have or risk losing you. Detachment also gives you the perspective necessary to recognize patterns that were previously invisible. When emotions are entangled, it is difficult to notice recurring behaviors, inconsistency, or lack of effort. Stepping back allows your mind to evaluate interactions objectively, without the distortion of attachment or fear. You can identify who genuinely respects your time, energy, and presence, versus those who only respond when pressured. This insight empowers you to make choices that align with your worth, rather than being swayed by temporary tension or emotional manipulation. For the other person, witnessing detachment can be jarring, because humans are wired to respond more sharply to the threat of loss than to repeated demands or pleas. When they see that your presence is steady, but not guaranteed to bend to their whims, they begin to reflect on their own actions. They become aware of gaps in effort, communication, and consistency that they might have ignored before. This is why detachment is such a powerful tool. It creates a mirror. You do not have to say anything dramatic or force any change. Your energy alone highlights reality. People begin to notice the difference between having you and potentially losing you. Detachment, however, is not passive. It is an intentional act of aligning your life with your values, priorities, and self-respect. It is not about waiting for the other person to change. It is about embodying a state of clarity that draws only what matches your energy. In this way, detachment transforms both your inner world and your outer reality. Your clarity becomes magnetic, your boundaries undeniable, and your presence influential without manipulation. It is a quiet but profound form of power, one that fosters awareness, inspires action, and commands respect without a single word being uttered. Loss is more powerful than pressure because it strikes at the core of human instinct. People naturally respond to absence and the threat of losing something valuable in ways that no amount of persuasion, pleading, or insistence can replicate. Pressure often leads to resistance, defensiveness, or temporary compliance. It can force someone to act in the moment, but it rarely creates lasting change or genuine effort. Pressure makes people feel controlled. Loss awakens their awareness. When someone senses that what they have may no longer be available, they begin to process the situation differently. They start to notice details they previously overlooked, remember moments they took for granted, and feel the void that could exist without the other person. It is not manipulation. It is a natural human reaction to the possibility of absence. This principle works in relationships, friendships, and even professional dynamics. When you over-explain, overcompensate, or continuously push for validation, people become accustomed to your efforts. Your energy becomes predictable, and their responses often follow the same predictable patterns. They might respond out of convenience, habit, or obligation, rather than out of genuine care or effort. But when you step back and allow space, you introduce a new variable, the possibility that they might not have what they once assumed was theirs. That possibility triggers reflection, urgency, and sometimes unexpected action. Loss creates clarity for both parties. You begin to see who is willing to rise to meet you, who takes responsibility for their absence, and who simply tolerates your presence. The other person, in turn, begins to see the consequences of their choices and behaviors. The difference between pressure and loss is subtle but crucial. Pressure demands immediate reaction. Loss invites introspection and intentional effort. Pressure can be loud and exhausting, often leaving both sides strained, frustrated, and resentful. Loss is quiet and powerful. It leaves space for reflection, for growth, and for authentic action that aligns with values rather than emotion-driven impulses. When someone realizes they might lose your presence, they are forced to confront their own priorities. They evaluate what they are willing to do to maintain the connection, not because they are being coerced, but because they genuinely see the impact of their choices. This dynamic also teaches you something vital, that your energy, attention, and presence are inherently valuable. When you stop bending under pressure, overgiving, or over-explaining, you reclaim your power. You no longer need to force compliance, approval, or affection. Instead, you create a natural tension where value is recognized, boundaries are respected, and effort becomes a conscious decision rather than a reaction to insistence. In this sense, loss is not a threat, it is a mirror. It reflects the reality of human behavior when confronted with something irreplaceable. It fosters awareness, inspires responsibility, and encourages genuine action. When someone understands that your absence is possible, they act intentionally. They communicate more clearly, show up more consistently, and demonstrate their care in ways pressure could never compel. Loss, when used with dignity and self-respect, is transformative. It does not manipulate, it illuminates. Self-respect is a quiet force that changes the way people respond to you, often in ways they don't immediately realize. When you hold yourself with dignity, when you refuse to accept less than what you deserve, you create a natural standard that others must acknowledge. Complacency thrives in environments where boundaries are blurred, where effort is optional, and where people assume your patience is endless. But self-respect disrupts that comfort. It forces the people around you to reassess their behavior, their priorities, and their willingness to meet you where you stand. It is not about arrogance or superiority, it is about clarity and consistency in valuing yourself. When someone has grown accustomed to taking your presence, energy, or attention for granted, they operate within a bubble of convenience. They may respond half-heartedly, delay commitments, or rely on your predictability. This is the essence of complacency, habitual, unconscious, and often invisible to the person living within it. But when you assert your worth, when you refuse to settle for less than respect, effort, and honesty, that bubble bursts. People begin to notice the shift. Your boundaries become non-negotiable. Your time is no longer endlessly flexible. Your energy is no longer freely borrowed. This subtle, steady presence of self-respect disrupts complacency because it creates a contrast between what was tolerated and what is now expected. It is like turning on a light in a room that had been dim for too long. Suddenly, everything that was hidden or ignored becomes visible. For the other person, this can feel jarring, even uncomfortable, because it demands reflection and action. Complacency relies on inaction, on the assumption that things will remain unchanged. Self-respect removes that assumption. People are forced to confront their own patterns, to evaluate whether their effort aligns with your value, and to recognize the consequences of continued indifference. This disruption is not about punishment or control. It is about alignment. It is about creating an environment where your presence is not taken for granted, where your standards are honored, and where genuine effort becomes necessary for connection. Over time, self-respect has a ripple effect. It clarifies your own priorities, strengthens your boundaries, and attracts people who are willing to rise to meet you. Those who cannot match your energy, commitment, or integrity will naturally drift away, not because you pushed them, but because your standards became non-negotiable. This is the power of self-respect. It reshapes dynamics without force, transforms relationships without manipulation, and commands attention without drama. Complacency cannot coexist with consistent self-respect, because where there is dignity, there is expectation, and where there is expectation, there is accountability. By holding yourself with unwavering respect, you do more than assert your worth. You teach others how to engage with you meaningfully. You show them that genuine connection is not automatic, that effort matters, and that your presence is a privilege, not a given. Ultimately, self-respect disrupts complacency because it replaces tolerance with standards, expectation with alignment, and habit with conscious action. Energy shift changes dynamics in ways that are often invisible at first, yet profoundly impactful. Human interactions are largely governed by subtle vibrations, unspoken cues, and the emotional tone each person carries. When your energy changes from neediness to independence, from uncertainty to grounded confidence, the environment around you responds accordingly. This shift does not require explanation, persuasion, or dramatic gestures. It works silently, like a tide altering the shape of the shore, influencing behavior, decisions, and the flow of connection. People respond to energy more than words, because words can be ignored, rationalized, or dismissed, but energy communicates at a deeper, almost instinctual level. When your presence is calm, stable, and self-assured, it creates a contrast to any prior patterns of imbalance, insecurity, or overexertion. That contrast forces a recalibration. Someone who has grown accustomed to a certain dynamic, perhaps one where they took your attention for granted or relied on your predictable efforts, suddenly notices a difference. They begin to sense that the rules have changed, even if nothing has been said. Your energy alone signals that you are no longer operating from the same place of constant accommodation, emotional urgency, or compulsion. This change often elicits responses that were previously dormant. Someone may initiate communication they once avoided, invest effort they once postponed, or confront the reality of their own inconsistency. The energy shift exposes gaps that words alone cannot fill because it creates awareness rather than argument. Importantly, this shift is not about forcing reaction. It is about embodying alignment with your worth, standards, and intention. When your energy reflects self-respect and independence, it attracts engagement that is authentic, intentional, and conscious. People begin to act because they sense a higher bar has been established, not because they feel pressured to perform. The dynamic moves from one of expectation and habitual patterns to one of choice and deliberate action. Over time, the impact of this energy shift compounds. The more consistently you maintain grounded energy, the more others adjust their behavior to match it, or they remove themselves from the dynamic altogether. Either outcome reinforces clarity and alignment because your energy sets the standard for what is acceptable and what is not. In relationships, friendships, or professional interactions, this principle transforms connections from transactional to meaningful. The shift in energy communicates that you are not dependent on approval or validation, that your presence is a conscious offering rather than a given, and that your attention is valuable. Those who respect this energy step up, those who do not step back. Energy, unlike words or ultimatums, carries authority without aggression. It shifts dynamics not through force, but through presence, consistency, and alignment. When you move from reaction to calm intentionality, from seeking to radiating value, the world around you responds. Dynamics do not remain static in the presence of such energy. The environment mirrors your shift, revealing who is willing to engage consciously, who is prepared to meet effort with effort, and who is incapable of rising to your level. In essence, energy changes everything. It rewrites the rules silently, sets new standards, and transforms interactions in ways that demand recognition, reflection, and authentic response. Consistency matters more than intensity because true transformation and genuine connection are rarely built on sudden bursts of energy or dramatic gestures. Intensity can be loud, attention-grabbing, and emotionally overwhelming, but it is often fleeting. It excites for a moment, provokes reaction, and creates temporary spikes in behavior or feeling. However, these bursts rarely produce lasting trust, commitment, or alignment. Consistency, on the other hand, communicates reliability, integrity, and intentionality. When someone demonstrates steady effort over time, it signals that their actions are rooted not in emotion-driven impulses, but in deliberate choice. This principle applies in relationships, personal growth, and professional endeavors alike. People may be drawn to intensity at first because it is stimulating and attention-grabbing, but over time, it is the consistent presence that builds confidence, stability, and respect. Consistency creates a foundation. It allows others to know what to expect, not in a limiting sense, but in a way that reassures them of your values, priorities, and standards. It distinguishes fleeting enthusiasm from genuine commitment. Intensity without consistency is like a firework. It dazzles briefly and disappears, leaving no lasting impact. Consistency without intensity may seem subtle, even quiet, but it builds credibility, cultivates trust, and demonstrates authenticity. In human interactions, this distinction is crucial. Someone who shows effort sporadically or who becomes intense only under pressure often triggers doubt and insecurity in others. Their actions feel conditional, reactive, or performative. But a person who maintains consistent behavior, who communicates clearly, acts with respect, and honors their word creates an environment where expectations are clear and effort is mirrored. This kind of consistency encourages reflection, accountability, and alignment. It allows the other person to see who you truly are, not just who you are, when motivated by emotion or circumstance. Consistency also strengthens internal alignment. When you act consistently with your values, standards, and boundaries, you reinforce your own sense of self-worth. You are no longer swayed by short-term reactions or temporary emotional highs and lows. Your life is guided by principle rather than impulse, and your actions resonate with integrity. Over time, consistency compounds. The small, steady actions accumulate into tangible results, stronger connections, and deepened trust. Intensity may spark initial interest, but it is the daily, unwavering commitment that sustains relationships, builds character, and commands respect. Consistency matters because it signals that your energy, attention, and effort are not negotiable commodities, they are intentional investments. It teaches others that real change and real value are demonstrated over time, not in sporadic bursts. When someone meets you in alignment with this principle, they understand that your presence and engagement are reliable and deliberate. They begin to respond in kind, matching your steadiness rather than reacting to temporary peaks. Ultimately, consistency is the quiet, persistent force that outlasts intensity. It shapes perceptions, influences behavior, and transforms dynamics without the need for drama or spectacle. While intensity may catch attention, consistency earns respect, trust, and genuine commitment. And it is in this steadiness that real power lies. True power is internal because it originates from a foundation that no one outside of you can take away. It is not dependent on approval, attention, or validation from others. External factors like praise, influence, or circumstance may amplify your capabilities temporarily, but they are unreliable and transient. Internal power, however, is self-sustaining. It comes from knowing your worth, understanding your boundaries, and aligning your actions with your values. When you operate from this internal source, your presence, decisions, and influence are steady, consistent, and magnetic. People often mistake loud displays, dominance, or aggression for power, but these are superficial. They may command attention for a moment, but they rarely inspire respect or lasting alignment. True power does not need to prove itself. It simply exists and is recognized naturally. It manifests as confidence, calmness, and intentionality, even in the face of chaos or uncertainty. When someone is internally powerful, their energy becomes a guiding force in their interactions. Others sense the strength beneath the surface, even when it is quiet or understated. This presence does not pressure or manipulate. It simply draws people toward clarity, responsibility, and authentic engagement. Internal power allows you to remain unmoved by fluctuations in others' behavior. You are not reactive to every inconsistency, criticism, or drama. Instead, you maintain a steady course, rooted in principle and self-respect. This stability is magnetic because it offers contrast to the uncertainty and volatility many people experience in relationships and life. Internal power also gives you the freedom to make choices without fear. When your confidence, self-worth, and clarity are sourced from within, you are not bound by the need to control outcomes. You understand that your value is inherent and that external circumstances do not define your significance. This creates a sense of calm decisiveness, where action is based on alignment rather than desperation. Furthermore, internal power cultivates resilience. Challenges, setbacks, and rejection no longer shake your foundation because your strength is not borrowed, it is intrinsic. You can navigate difficult situations with grace and intentionality, maintaining composure and perspective while others around you react emotionally or impulsively. Internal power also fosters accountability and intentional influence. Because your actions stem from your values and standards, they are deliberate and effective. You inspire change, not through coercion or intimidation, but through example, clarity, and the quiet authority of someone who knows their worth. In relationships, this principle is particularly transformative. When you operate from internal power, you do not chase, plead, or beg for validation. Your energy communicates value without manipulation, and it creates space for others to act intentionally or step away if they cannot match your alignment. External reactions become secondary to your internal equilibrium. In essence, true power is internal because it is self-contained, enduring, and aligned with authenticity. It is not dependent on circumstance, perception, or emotion. When you cultivate internal power, you hold the ability to influence, inspire, and navigate life with confidence, clarity, and calm authority. It is this internal mastery that transforms presence into impact, independence into magnetism, and awareness into unshakable influence. The truth is, transformation begins within you. When you cultivate self-respect, shift your energy, act consistently, and embrace your internal power, you no longer need to chase or plead. You become a presence that demands awareness without force, a standard that inspires action without pressure, and a force that cannot be ignored. Those who truly value you will rise to meet you, not out of obligation, but because they recognize the clarity, confidence, and worth you embody. And for those who cannot, your evolution gently shows them the path out, leaving space only for what aligns with your energy. The power to change dynamics, influence others, and shape outcomes has always been within you. Stand firm, stay aligned, and let the natural flow of awareness, respect, and intentionality guide those who matter most. When you do, what is unexpected will happen, not because you forced it, but because you became impossible to take for granted.